And we are live. Hey, fellas. I am now in my hotel room. It is quite late. I think it is almost midnight here in Atlanta, here for a conference. So let me post this link up on the Twitterverse, see if anyone wants to join in. But here we are today. We just came off a fresh new TNF game. It was as horrible as a casual fan to watch an ugly game where a lot of sloppy things happen, as is typical of a TNF game. So it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, so today we're going to just review the first month of the season, and I'm sure here on our show tonight. Just a quick episode. I didn't do one last week because things got busy and traveling was also affecting my schedule. But I'm hoping now we can get started, talk a lot about what just happened, talk about what we can look forward to. And yeah, let me just finish this posting on YouTube. And the episode 9, recording live tonight. Questions. Perfect. Okay, so for tonight's episode, I would like to review a little bit about what has gone on, going back a little bit to the off season. But before we get started on that, let me talk a bit about our sponsor. You like fantasy football, maybe you like the DFS, you want to try the DFS scene, but get confused, get really bogged down by like the salaries and getting in a lot of the terminologies that you might get lost in, chalk, fade, GPP, cash, all of that. Well, now playdraft.com has a different style of DFS where you actually feel more comfortable with the traditional drafting. As a snake draft, you can draft with strangers, you can draft with friends, and every week you draft a new team. You don't have to worry about injuries hanging onto your team throughout the season. It's a fantastic way of playing fantasy football. And you can earn cold hard cash winning in those contests. Sorry. When you sign up at playdraft.com, our promo code is all capital letters FakePigSkin. You'll get a free $3 entry when you make your first deposit, and you also get a first year for free at our FakePigskin.com contents, where we have wonderful writers that will keep you up to date with everything you need to know about fantasy football. We even have fantasy NASCAR now. We have DFS MMA. We even have Supercross, which is written by our site big man, Regan Yant. So getting on to today's episode, the season where we started, as typical of most seasons, even though people keep mentioning, oh, this season there were more injuries than usual, or this season things have changed so much from previous seasons. And that's yes and no on both parts. Yes, some things are different. We didn't expect the injuries to hit some of our stud guys like David Johnson, and we didn't expect Sammy Watkins to be traded in the prime of his career. But it's also not atypical because last season we had a slew of injuries quite early on in the season. You may be the one that was affected by Des Bryant's collarbone injury, or you may be another one that has been struck by Corey Coleman, who happens to be injured again every time he's on my redraft team. So take it for what it's will. Maybe it's my fault. But again, we see this. This is not new. If you've been playing Dynasty for a long time, you probably already see some of the trends repeating itself, and you're well prepared for it. If you're new to it, just think about what happened during the month of April, May, June, July, the teams you drafted, the startups that you have, all those teams that look so great in the offseason has suddenly turned into a complete disaster, or maybe the teams that you thought you were coming into the season as a disaster suddenly turned into a very, very competitive team, and you have assets to boot. So that's why draft picks are so important to accumulate early in the off seasons when people think, oh, they have a chance, they are contesting. They see your team that may not look as ready to compete, and so they're more willing to shelve out some of the picks so that their teams can compete. And sometimes it works out, and most of the times, not most of the times, but a lot of times we see the opposite quite happen. Your rebuilding team suddenly is in the middle of contention. Well, now we're at a great point in the season. The quarter point of the season, it's a good time to reevaluate. Are you competing? Are you rebuilding? If you were started off as a rebuild but find yourself in the middle of contention, several different ways you can go. You can stay on course, be disciplined, continue to trade off some of the surprising assets, package them and trade them for more picks, or trade them for more useful players, or players that are on injured reserve, like a David Johnson or an Allen Robinson. Players that are disappointing now that were expected to be great, such as Ajayi, who is having a really tough start to the season right now. But if you're a contending team of the season, this is a pivotal point. Are you still trying to go for it, or are you going to say, I'm going to blow it up? And at this point, the Wolves, people smell blood. No doubt about it. People smell blood, and they will come after you for trying to acquire your veterans that are underperforming now but may be hopeful for contention. And they'll start trying to test you out by offering you very mediocre picks or mediocre packages. And you just have to be aware who is actually trying to help you out, or who is really trying to pull a fast one on you. It is very easy to give up, to be discouraged at this point. But if you are steadfast in your willingness to contend, in your willingness to compete, I would suggest that you make wise decisions that you don't bomb your team badly, but also won't put your team future in jeopardy. It's easier said than done. Conceptually, that's what everyone wants, but at this end of the day, it's not as easy to pull off. So that leads into my other kind of topic to talk about, is dynasty trading. Dynasty trading is very important in all types of dynasty formats. Your league may have different strokes, different people. Some who are, every time you see them, they're like, let's trade. Or some leagues where there's like dead and there's nobody even responding to your trades. And all of that really can turn you off from trading, and I get that. I've been on both ends of that, and hopefully I found a good middle balance point where I like to trade when needed to, and hold when I don't need to trade, and just continue to build on focusing on my team building process. Trading is related to a lot of things that I've talked about until this point. If you haven't watched out my other episodes yet, go back to the other episodes. Think about how you want your team building strategy to be. Think about how you want to approach the waiver wires. Think about how you want to approach team building and what makes for a good dynasty team. Now, in my case, I think I'm at a good point right now. I still have rooms to improve, but I think I'm at a good point right now where I know when trading is needed, and when I can start selling off players, and how that all ties back into what I believe is the best way to build my dynasty team. So to build that trading process, you really need to know where your team wants to look like. Are you one of those who want a quick turnaround? Then running backs, quarterbacks are typically the targets that you want. Not as easy to trade for running backs as you can for quarterbacks, but at the same time, those are really a floor types of guy. You know, the good quarterbacks and the good running backs are someone who you can hopefully the ones that you identify as good are the ones that will give you that consistent points, consistent lifeline, and then you just sub in those wide receiver, the middle tier wide receivers, or the taking a chance on the waiver wire wide receivers, and that will really gives you a good a floor play and ready to put your team in contention in every week. That's kind of my process. That's how I kind of think about Dynasty. Now, if I'm more of a slow, patiently building, I want those high variance guys. I want the wide receivers. I want the tight ends. And those would be the primary guys that I prioritize over the quarterbacks and running backs, mainly because they have a longer life span. As some of you may know, wide receivers have a longer career of productivity compared to a running back. And a tight end takes a while to acclimate. We see that with CJ Fedorowicz. We're probably going to see that with Hunter Henry's. We're going to see that with other tight ends as well that you want this year, right now, and slowly let them get familiar with the NFL and become a more catching targets in year 3, 4, or 5. Much like what Eifert did, and you had to wait 3 years for him to explode. Much what you had in who's that other guy? The other guy that developed much later in his tight end, Martellus Bennett. He didn't really do anything in his first 3 or 4 years, but once he clicked, oh man, he was he's a reliable tight end. Oh, Kelsey was another one who didn't do anything in his first years, but has grown. So wide receivers and tight ends are more of what I consider good pieces to want to build around when you are on a rebuilding type of team. Quarterbacks would be good too, but they are in one quarterback leagues. Typically, I don't feel the need to chase after them because their value continues to be low, and therefore, once I feel that my team is ready to make a push, that's when I want the quarterback asset. That's when I want to add the running back asset, and perhaps, hopefully, by then you have good core of wide receivers and tight ends you can trade off for those running backs. So that's kind of an idea of what my philosophy is, and hopefully that will give you some idea how you can build around your dynasty team philosophy. Maybe you have a different philosophy than me. Maybe you feel that running backs, you should always keep trying to keep reloading on running backs and quarterbacks, and that they are the lifelines of your dynasty team, and that they will help you be competing while also rebuilding around them. That's a fantastic strategy if that works for you. And so that's how you should think about what your trading targets are. Maybe you're willing to, if you are very good at identifying who the next breakout running back is, or if you figure out you can probably grab a Kareem Hunt type later in the draft, and rather than investing in a high first round pick, maybe you'll be more than willing to sell off your stud running backs before they fall off, and then get those assets, trade for a wide receiver and then a lower pick, and then package the wide receiver for a running back, and that's keeps rebuilding. So there's a lot of ways that dynasty can be played, and that plays into the way you want to trade. Now, in my next episode, I'm probably going to talk more about trading with the different types of trade partners you see, the different type of trade personalities. Overwhelmingly, you'll see people that are trying to pull a fast one on you, or trying to sell you really short-term assets so that they can get a greater asset, someone that has great potential, that's being touted by the great writers on Twitterverse. And perhaps we'll talk about ways to not fall into the trap of chasing short-term gains, but building a more well-rounded team, finding a solution to bad trades. We'll probably get a few talks about trade personalities, like how people do they like to approach you first and sorry, talk to you and start bouncing off ideas, or are there people who are throwing you proposals and try to get you to work from there? And most oftentimes what I get And I've been guilty of this, is throwing a low ball offer and trying to get talks to get started. It seems like more and more that turns people off, and I decided to not do that unless it's a personality of the league itself, where everyone just tries to lowball offer you first, and I'll lowball back. It's just the language that they speak. That's kind of how I want to fit in with them. So we'll talk about that more in next episode, but kind of think about where you are at the quarter point. This is a very pivotal point, because if you don't take advantage of the trades that are happening now, trade talks, then you are putting your team on neutral, and that is never a good place to be. If because you're not rebuilding, you're not retooling, you're not contending, you're going to end up with a very neutral, mediocre team in the long term by the end of this off season. What you want to focus on in the off season is always have enough tradable assets, because the months are long, people get impatient, things change rapidly. You want those tradable assets by off season, and those typically what you can get right now are players, because picks become harder and harder and harder to acquire. So right now, if you have an exciting player that you think you can flip for a pick, it's not a bad idea to do so right now, regardless if you're contending or if you're rebuilding, because picks don't get any cheaper than right now. People will want the production. They're still sharp. They can go to Twitter. So don't offer a low ball. Make a reasonable offer. Tariq Cohen, for example, you probably drafted him for a low third, undrafted, maybe a fourth round pick. Now people are willing to give you a second round pick. That's profit already. It doesn't matter if Tariq Cohen is going to explode. If his range of outcome for me, for example, and this is not what I think will happen, but for example, if you don't think that Tariq Cohen's range of outcome is a consistent RB1, then why not trade him? Why not believe that the second is close to the value that you can get for him right now? Maybe down this line in the season, give him 4 more weeks with Trubisky, see what happens. Maybe he becomes a RB1 type of a borderline RB1. Maybe you'll get a low-end first-round pick. I find that as fair of an asking price as anyone for Tariq Cohen right now. So those are some of the things that you can think about. Project to the players. What are their most likely outcome? And then does the trade offer, the trade value, match that projected outcome? And then you can make a trade negotiation, find your sweet spot, find your trade partner's sweet spot, and then make magic, make trade love, something, make it happen. So this is a short episode of Dynasty Mind. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you have any questions about our site, FakePigSkin.com, or questions about Dynasty, just hop on by, add me at FFDynasty101, and I'll be more than gladly to guide you. Our subscribers, of course, get a more detailed, more personalized kind of advice from me through Twitter DM, through email, and I will help you construct a team that you want to see happen. Whether it's Dynasty, whether it's redraft, I'm very comfortable with. All right, thank you for joining me. Hope you have a good night. Hope you enjoy the game. Hope you have a great start to your fantasy week 5. Peace out.